Welcome to the Global Roundtable organized by the Global Foundation for Democracy and Development. Today we have as a guest José Miguel Guzmán, who is the Chief of Population and Development Branch of the United Nations Populations Fund. Welcome to the Global Roundtable, José Miguel.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here with us. We are very delighted and very impressed by the work that the United Nations Populations Fund is doing, and we're also delighted that you are Dominican. So it's wonderful to have you here, and we're looking forward to a very exciting discussion. As international leaders grapple with how to effectively address the current and future challenges impacting the Earth and the over 7 billion people that call it home, the need for timely and accurate data on population dynamics and trends is even more evident. Today we will discuss the critical role of population dynamics in global development strategies post-2015, which will mark the conclusion of the 20-year plan of action of the International Conference on Population and Development, and also the 15-year-long time frame, censuses, surveys, demographic-based investigations and analysis. So before we discuss, could you tell us, José Miguel, a little bit more about what the United Nations Population Fund does? Where does the name come from, a little bit of its history, and a little bit of its actions?
Thank you. The United Nations Population Fund has been created and the name originally was the United Nations Fund for Population Activities. Because we cannot match the name UNFPA to the current name that we have. We work in more than 100 countries around the world, supporting countries, supporting governments and civil society to build their population and implement their population programs. That means that we support countries in how they develop the national plans for reproductive health, family planning. We support aspects of gender activities there. We also provide support in terms of incorporating population dynamic issues in the national agendas, including the development agenda, the social and economic agenda.
I just read recently, actually on your website, that your executive director was nominated the honorary woman by the women ambassadors to the United Nations, who originally were complaining that a man is leading an institution that promotes gender issues. And when he presented his plan of action and his experience, they were so impressed that they said that, more than agreeing, they are delighted to name him the honorary woman president. So could you tell us a little bit, has the work of the agency changed under his mandate, or how is he working maybe more or more effectively on gender issues? Has this become more of a priority?
Well, I think that the gender issue, as you know, is part now of the central issues of the UN Women. But UNFPA has been working a lot on gender issues, particularly in the issue of violence against women. And even if at the global level, at headquarters level, it's basically the responsibility of the UN Women. And there is a very good relationship with the UNFPA at the country level, because they know that we have done a very good work in some areas, and we are trying to work together and to benefit for this exchange. I think there are changes in the way we are dealing with gender issues. We know now that there is a specific agency dealing with those issues, so we try to focus our main mandate in relating gender issue to the main issue of our agenda, reproductive health and population dynamics.
And talking about other UN agencies, what are the other agencies that United Nations Population Fund works most? And could you describe maybe some of the interaction?
Well, we work with WHO and UNICEF in issues related, for example, with the situation of the young people. We work a lot also, in case of WHO, we work in terms of reproductive health issues. And, but also we are working, for example, now with ILO, with FAO, with UN Habitat on issues related to the incorporation of population dynamics in the post-2015 development agenda. So we have a variety of contacts both at the global level and at the national level. At the national level, it depends on the country. There are countries in which we are working within the the new modality of working together, and then we are working with almost all agencies of UN.
Is there any sense of overlap with any of the agencies? And if there is one, how do you avoid it, or how do you more collaborate than overlap?
There are always overlap. It's natural because you cannot dissect the human being like in different parties and say this is UNFPA and this is UNICEF, this is WHO. We are just one entity. So this has happened also with the society. So I think there are some overlaps, but what we are trying to do, and I think increasingly, we are working more together than before. In every issue, there is a lot of interagency work on everything we do. It's not like in the past that every agency used to work just in their issues and not necessarily related to what others are doing. Now we are called every day to avoid those overlap by working together.
Oh, thank you. That's a very useful piece of information. And also institution-wise and structure-wise, you are headquartered in New York, right?
Yes.
But there are other agencies, there are other headquarters around the world, or just you're working directly with every government and every country?
Well, we have our headquarters here in New York, but we have also regional offices.
Yes.
One in Latin America, 2 in Africa, 1 in Asia, and 1 in Eastern Europe, Central Asia. And we have also national offices in most of the countries of the world, in most of the developing countries of the world.
And do you also collaborate with NGOs and community organizations, grassroots organizations? How has that experience been?
I think we collaborate with NGOs, with the civil society in general, both at the global level and at the national level. How it works, it depends on the issue. For example, in some cases, we work with civil society organizations when there are issues that sometimes the government, they don't want to take a strong position on that, but they are open that other people work with UNFPA. But also we work with them, with civil society, in many cases in which we know that they have the capacity to reach the population that is most vulnerable, and they have experience working with them, and they know how to work with them. And this is something we have a lot of experience at the country level on that, but also the international level. For example, now we are planning this global consultation on population dynamics as part of the post-2015 development agenda, and we are planning a specific meeting on the civil society and how the civil society see this issue of population dynamics in the post-2015 development agenda.
So you kind of receive the information from civil society, you're interested in their input, you share the information with them through your research, and are they in any way engaged in the moment of taking action or maybe carrying out programs as well?
Yes, of course, because when we talk about participation, we cannot just stay at the level of providing information or sharing information, because this is just like the first level of participation. What we want really is empowerment, we want ownership, and we want the civil society to really participate. Both, in some cases, for example, in some countries, they are part of the implementation. They implement some of our programs. But now, for example, in terms of the population dynamic issues, we want that they become active in terms of talking to their government to say, this is important, and this, you have to consider this in the discussion. Because we know that what we can do from our perspective of UN is just to provide the society, the governments, the NGOs, the information they need to position those issues. But finally, it's the work of NGOs that will make possible if those issues are included or not in the final agenda.
Well, that's great. We want to be a part of that initiative, definitely. Yeah. And talking about now the content of your work, of your research, of your activity, tell us a little bit more about what are the demographic trends right now?
We are calling the most demographic trends as mega trends, because what's happening now is that there are some processes that will be affecting everything in the next future. They have already affected, but they will be impacting more in the near future. One of them is what we can say in terms of the change in the structure by age of the population. We know that in many countries the population is aging, and there is an increase in the proportion of people 60 or 65 and over, and that has a lot of implication for everything, not just for the pension system, and people just focus on that, but also in terms of the people participation, in terms of the labor force participation, and also in terms of the demand for health. But also we have other trends. In some countries with very high fertility, they are aging but not too rapidly, but the population, the young people, is still growing very fast. So we have this situation, particularly in least developed countries, in which they have a huge young population that is asking for education, for employment opportunities, for housing, and then there is a challenge for those countries in terms of how they manage this growing population. So what we have now is, in terms of structure by age, is some kind of extreme diversity. In one side, we have populations that are aging very fast. In other words, we have populations that are not aging fast, but they are having a very young population, a very important young population. So this is one important trend. The other one is related to migration. Migration is increasing, and we can expect that because the population is increasing. Mm-hmm. So even if we keep the rate of migration, the number of migrants will increase. But there are some changes in the last, particularly in the last decades, in terms of what's happening with migration. One important change is that we used to think that migration is an issue that people move from developing countries to developed countries. But what happened now is that South-South migration is becoming more important than South-North migration. Even the last estimate from the population division, we're talking about a stock of migrants about 700 million from south to the north and 700 million from south to south.
So it's almost the same.
Almost the same, but
yes.
I was talking to colleagues from the population division. They are telling me that the new estimate will give even a higher figure for the developing country, for south-south migration than from south to north.
Right.
So we need to change the idea that migration is just that, people moving from developing countries to developed countries. This is changing. But also the structure of migrant is changing. Basically, we continue to have a high proportion of migrants from younger ages. It has been like this, and I think it will continue to be. But we know also the population is aging. If the population is aging, the structure of migration will change too. So I think there are important changes in migration. And I think these are two of the most important factors that we can think. The third one, in terms of the mega trends, is urbanization. Latin America has already seen this process in the past. So that's why Latin America is the most urbanized region in the developing world, more than Asia and much more than Africa. But if you think in terms of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa particularly, and some countries of Asia, most of the population still live in rural areas. But they are moving to the urban areas, and the growth of the urban population is very fast. In many countries of Africa, you will see the population doubling in less than 20 years. So if we think in terms of planning, on anything you plan, from education, from health, housing, anything you think in terms of planning, need to be adapted to a population that is doubling in less than 20 years. And in some cases, we know that the doubling of the population means the doubling of the space. So the doubling of the transportation needs for the population. So that have a huge impact on emission, for example. What will be the effect of this process depends on how we plan for this. And I think this is why in both migration, urbanization, of changing age structure of the population, the best recipe is that we need to consider that we can plan ahead, because those processes can be anticipated.
Could you imagine that in developed countries there would be a kind of migration from north to the south, as the aging population is looking for costs of living that are lower and maybe kind of life that's more agreeable to their aging situation? Could you also imagine a change in migration or urbanization going backwards to countryside and villages that's happening more and more in developed countries? Is that something that has been noticed as well, or not really?
Well, let me start by the urbanization issue. I don't think that we can expect like a move from the cities to the countryside as a global process. Particularly in developing countries, what will happen is an increase of the population in urban areas. And there is nothing that can stop that. Some countries, they say, we can try to keep people in rural area. I don't know why they want to do that, because the only thing they can have there is more poverty. So, because in general, people increase the quality of life when they move to the city. what happened is that in some cases, and in many cases, they move to the city and there is no condition there because there is no plan to receive the people that are coming to the city. But we know that in advance. So if that is happening, something that we should be preventing to happen. In terms of what happened in developed countries, when you move from the cities to the countryside, actually you are having the same condition you have in the city. So it's not some kind of move from from the city to the real rural areas. In terms of international migration, we can expect many things to happen. But I think at least, unless there is some catastrophic event, I don't think we can expect a huge migration from developed to developing regions. Because even if there are some crises, people still live better in developed countries than in developing countries. And not just because they have economic resources, but also because they have institutions. And this is something that is missing in many developing countries. When you think, for example, in terms of aging, it's a lack of institution on every topic, on every level, from the from the local level, but also to the province or level and to the national level.
Thank you, José Miguel. Also with us is here Jamila Eusebio, the Director of Global Foundation's office in New York, and she will address questions in relation to the Cairo conference and also to the Earth Summit.
Yes. Before that, I would like to thank you very much because as a Dominican, we are really proud of the work that you are doing. My question is, where does the world stand in terms of realizing the 15 years program of action adopted during the 1994 International Conference on Population and Development in Cairo, and what remains to be done?
I think we have big achievements in terms of the implementation of the Conference on Population Development of 1994. And in any topics you take, one of the most important topics of the Cairo conference was about providing the opportunity for women to take decisions and for couples to take decisions about how many children they want, in what condition this decision is taking place, was also very important. The issue of reproductive rights was at the center of on this. And I think we have made progress. And if we see what's happening in many countries, there is an increase in the possibility for women to take the decision. There is more access to reproductive health services. There is more access to family planning services. And there is a better linkages between all those services. Before, we used to think about family planning as a separate issue from HIV/AIDS, from other issues that are related to reproductive health. I think we have made progress. We have also made important progress in terms of the institutional framework for that. We have now institutions, even in some cases we have ministry dealing with reproductive health. We have also made progress in incorporating population issues in the National Development Agenda. If you ask me about what is pending, I think, yes, there is always pending issues. I think one of the most important issues, there is still more than 200,000 women in the world that has not access to family planning, even if they want. This is what we call a main need for family planning. So this is a still pending issue. Another pending issue is maternal mortality. We have seen a reduction in maternal mortality, but this reduction is not what we were expecting in terms of the MDGs outcomes. And most important, I think, is the fact that even in middle-income countries in which we have seen good progress, we note that there is a lot to be done in terms of inequalities. Even if most of the population have access, there are a group of people that have not access. They are really out of reach of most of the programs. And I think that's why we think that one of the unfinished agenda of the MDGs is inequality.
Yeah, definitely. And I do have another question. Can you share some of the outcomes for the UNFPA that arose from Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro earlier this year?
Yes. I think for Rio was very important. We work a lot trying to bring the issue of population and the Cairo agenda to the Rio conference. We work with the governments, with private sector, with NGOs, with academia. And finally, what we got there, I think is important. We have the language of the reproductive health of the ICPD Conference on Population Development in the Rio output. And we have some reference to the need to incorporate population dynamics, particular population data and projections in the equation of sustainable development. So I think we have made progress in terms of the Rio, but we know that we need to do more work in what's coming, is particularly in the Sustainable Development Goals. And for us, this is a challenge. It depends what will be that the country will be agreeing in relation to that, how these Sustainable Development Goals will be connected to the post-2015 development process. But I think we are happy at least with this result, but we know that we can do much more than that.
And let me ask you, José Miguel, now at the end, what is the post-2015 agenda for the United Nations Population Fund?
Well, we know that all international efforts are concentrated now in what will happen after this year, 2015, in which the MDG is supposed to finish. And I think it's important because we are talking about the future of the humanity. We are talking about what is our agenda, how we see development in the next 20, 30, 50 years, and how we see the world in the future. So I think the interest that all agencies of UN are having in this process, but also the interest that comes from the civil society, from the people in the street, is related to the fact that we are discussing about this future. We are discussing about their future, the future of them, but also the future of their children and their grandchildren. And for us in UNFPA, it's very important that in this agenda, we have the main issue of agree on the population conference in Cairo there, particularly in terms of providing the women and couples the possibility to decide the number of children they want, but particularly to have access to reproductive health services. But we also want that they include division in terms of what's happened with the population, why the population is changing, and what is the impact of those changes in everything we do. We need that they include urbanization in this process. We need that they care about the future of cities and how we're going to manage cities that will be doubling their population in less than 20 years. We care about migrants and their rights and how their rights in some cases are violated. We want that the migration take place in conditions that are good for both receiving and countries that are responsible for most of the migration. And we want that the process of aging is taken with these two sides of the equation, not just in terms of a burden that will take most of the budget of government, but also in terms of a celebration and an opportunity for business, an opportunity for changing and framing our society based in a new consideration that we need to work for a society of all ages, not just a society for some ages.
And how much do you think we've learned from Millennium Development Goal process? Has something been learned that we'll do better and we'll be able to apply in a better way and be more efficient after 2015?
I think if you ask me for a word, I think we learn to focus. The MDG process, not many people was, I don't think that there was one person that was completely happy with the MDG as it was developed, because he said, why this is not incorporated, why this is not there? So many people were complaining about why we have not everything. But at the same time, everybody recognized that this was the magic of the MDGs. It was the to focus on some specific issue that for people is clear, this is what we want. And I think in the discussion for the post-2015 development agenda, one of the most important issues is that we keep this focus. I think this one of the other, I think, thing that we learned from the MDG was that there is a possibility for a global agenda. In the MDGs they focus more on in terms of the situation of developing countries. And I think we did better. We do a good job in bringing countries together to work through a common agenda. Now we are talking about the world. We are not talking anymore about just about developing countries. The post-2015 is an agenda, it's a world agenda, it's a global agenda. And I think it will make the challenge still more interesting and more difficult, but also at the same time, I think many countries will be happy to see that we are not just focusing just in a group of countries, but all countries need to commit to the same.
To be more comprehensive and more efficient.
I hope so.
Thank you so much, José Miguel, and we'll be definitely working with you as much as we can from our little nonprofit.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you to you.
Thank you for watching the Global Roundtable organized by the Global Foundation for Democracy and Development. We had the pleasure to interview José Miguel Guzmán, Chief of the Development and Population Branch of the United Nations Population Fund. Thank you.